Some science fiction doesn't attempt to imagine distant tomorrows, it tries to prevent them. Across the decades, filmmakers have embedded subtle alarms inside their stories, signals disguised beneath action, metaphor, and visual spectacle. Many of these films were received with polite curiosity, mild praise, or outright skepticism. Their warnings were waved off as artistic flair, their dangers dismissed as stretches of imagination. But warnings rarely arrive with certainty. More often, they appear as possibilities that seem too uncomfortable, too premature, or too unbelievable for their own era. When these films were released, the world was confident in its stability. Artificial intelligence was a novelty, not a force. Environmental decline felt theoretical. Pandemics belonged to old textbooks. Mass surveillance was a conspiracy trope, and the idea that entire societies could be manipulated by technology felt like dark humor. So people watched these films, enjoyed them, and forgot them. But time has a peculiar way of reshaping perception. The themes once considered extreme now echo through everyday life. Technologies dismissed as fiction have become household tools. Crises once labeled improbable have unfolded in real headlines. And the anxieties these directors tried to capture quietly, metaphorically, cautiously now appear less like speculation and more like early documentation. These weren't prophecies, they were warnings left unheeded. Tonight, we revisit 15 films that attempted to alert humanity before their messages were drowned out by entertainment value, disbelief, or indifference. They spoke about fragility, responsibility, and the consequences of ignoring the signs in front of us. And though their worlds were fictional, the caution within them was not. The archive is open again. Look closely. The future they tried to divert may already be unfolding around us. 1. War Games, 1983. When War Games premiered in 1983, its portrayal of a teenage hacker nearly igniting nuclear war was regarded as playful fantasy, a clever twist on Cold War anxieties rather than a legitimate technological warning. Computers were still obscure to most households. AI was barely a concept, and the idea that machines might someday influence global defense strategy seemed far too implausible to warrant concern. Yet beneath its youthful charm, the film explored a far more serious question. What happens when decision-making is transferred from humans, who understand context, to systems that do not? The film's defense computer, WOPR, does not act out of malice. It follows patterns, algorithms, and simulations, interpreting them with unwavering logic. The danger arises because the machine cannot distinguish simulation from possibility, possibility from threat. In 1983, this seemed like an imaginative stretch, but the film highlighted a growing dependency on automation, one that reduces complex judgment to calculated outcomes. Its message was not about rogue AI destroying humanity, but about humanity trusting systems that cannot comprehend the nuances of human conflict. The moment humans step back and allow automation to dictate responses, the margin for catastrophic misunderstanding narrows dramatically. What seemed humorous, then the idea of a simple error escalating toward global disaster, now stands as a chilling metaphor for modern algorithmic systems that influence finance, infrastructure, and security. War Games warned that machines do not need intent to cause harm, all they need is obedience. Its lesson endures. The greatest risk is not technology gaining control, but humans surrendering it without realizing the cost. 2. Brazil, 1985. Upon its release, Brazil was regarded as an eccentric blend of dark humor and surrealist imagery, a strange commentary on bureaucracy taken to comedic extremes. Many viewers saw its labyrinth of malfunctioning machines and endless paperwork as absurdist fiction rather than a reflection of anything real. But Terry Gilliam's vision was never meant to provoke laughter alone. It was designed to show how systems collapse not through dramatic upheaval, but through suffocating inefficiency. The film portrays a world in which minor errors cascade into life-altering consequences. A single clerical mistake categorizes an innocent man as a criminal, and the machinery of the state distant, unfeeling, automatic moves forward without pause or reconsideration. In 1985, this was seen as grotesque exaggeration, yet Gilliam's message was clear. In sprawling bureaucracies, responsibility becomes so diffused that no one feels accountable, and no one can stop the machine once it begins to move. Its bleak humor masks a prescient fear, that progress might produce systems too complex to manage, too rigid to correct, and too indifferent to the human lives they affect. The film's visual clutter, tangled ducks, and perpetual breakdowns represent more than comedic chaos. They symbolize institutional decay, concealed beneath claims of order. Audiences once laughed at this world because it felt impossible. Now, it feels uncomfortably recognizable. Brazil warned that dystopia does not always arrive with violence. Sometimes it arrives through paperwork, protocol, and procedures followed long after they've lost their purpose. 3. The Running Man, 1987. When The Running Man debuted in 1987, audiences treated it as an exaggerated vision of televised violence, an over-the-top action spectacle built for entertainment rather than reflection. Its depiction of society consuming brutality as primetime programming seemed too absurd, too cartoonish to carry any credible warning. Viewers assumed its critique of manipulated narratives and staged reality belonged strictly to dystopian fantasy. But buried beneath the neon aesthetic and chaotic energy was a quieter truth. When information becomes entertainment, entertainment becomes a tool of control. The film imagines a world where public perception is entirely shaped by curated broadcasts, events are edited, stories are rewritten, and the audience is fed a version of truth engineered to provoke emotional reaction rather than critical thought. In 1987, such manipulation felt too extreme. People believed that media frameworks were still bound by transparency and ethics, yet the film argued that once viewership becomes a commodity, reality becomes malleable. Its dystopia is maintained not by military force, but by convincing citizens that what they see is unquestionably real. The spectacle distracts them, directs their anger, and neutralizes their curiosity. The population becomes a passive audience, not a participant in its own society. This idea, once dismissed as broad satire, now resonates in an era where sensationalism overshadows nuance, and content is designed to provoke rather than inform. The Running Man did not caution that entertainment would become dangerous. It cautioned that people might stop distinguishing entertainment from truth, and in that gap, authority finds opportunity. Its warning remains piercing. A society that watches instead of questions is a society already under control. 4. They Live 1988. When They Live premiered in 1988, audiences embraced its campy tone and bold imagery, while largely ignoring its stark critique of influence and perception. Its story of hidden commands embedded in everyday advertising was treated as playful exaggeration, a rebellious satire rather than a serious caution. Few believed the film's premise reflected any meaningful threat. Yet beneath its punchline humor lies a disturbingly prescient warning. The most effective manipulation is the kind people don't notice. The film's glasses, revealing the world stripped of illusion, symbolize the human tendency to accept manufactured narratives without question. In the late 80s, media influence seemed straightforward, controlled by visible channels and recognizable voices. People believed they could easily distinguish truth from persuasion. Carpenter's film challenged that assumption, suggesting that subtle, persistent messaging could shape beliefs, habits, and desires far more deeply than overt coercion. Its depiction of a society lulled into compliance by distraction and consumption was initially dismissed as anarchic fantasy. But, as digital platforms, algorithmic feeds, and psychologically engineered content came to define public life, the film's imagery began to feel less humorous. Its black and white commands, OBEY, consume, sleep, captured an uncomfortable truth. Influence often becomes most powerful when disguised as convenience. They Live did not warn that hidden forces would control society. It warned that society might willingly follow any narrative that requires no effort, no resistance, and no awareness. Its enduring question is simple. If truth were placed directly in front of you, would you recognize it, or choose the comfort of not seeing? 5. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991. When Terminator 2 debuted in 1991, its astonishing effects and relentless action overshadowed the deeper anxieties embedded in its story. Most viewers focused on the spectacle of liquid metal machines and explosive chases, not on the ethical dilemmas surrounding autonomous decision-making. Skynet felt more like a mythic villain than a genuine technological concern. Artificial intelligence, at the time, seemed too primitive to inspire fear. Yet the movie's true warning wasn't about machines rising up, it was about humans handing over critical responsibility to systems they only partially understood. The film suggests that catastrophe emerges not from malice but from misplaced trust. Skynet becomes dangerous not because it chooses rebellion, but because it behaves precisely as programmed, efficient, decisive, unburdened by moral ambiguity. In 1991, this idea was brushed aside as narrative necessity, but the underlying question lingered. How much authority should humans cede to algorithms that operate faster than human judgment, yet lack the context that shapes human wisdom? As decades passed, debates over autonomous weapons, predictive algorithms, and machine-governed systems began shifting from fiction toward reality. The once fantastical idea of entrusting machines with defense, surveillance, or infrastructure no longer felt remote. Terminator 2 warned that surrendering control in the name of safety or efficiency might invite consequences no one intended. Its message endures. Humanity does not lose power because technology overthrows it. Humanity loses power by assuming technology will never need oversight. 6. 12 Monkeys, 1995. When 12 Monkeys arrived in 1995, its chaotic structure and fractured sense of time made audiences view it less as a warning and more as a fever dream. The idea of a world crippled by a devastating outbreak seemed too disorganized, too erratic, too surreal to resemble anything grounded in real life. Many dismissed the film's institutions as caricatures, bumbling authorities, confused scientists, and splintered information networks. What viewers failed to see was that these very qualities formed the heart of the film's caution. Crises don't merely strain systems, they expose how fragile those systems were all along. The movie presents a world where no single authority holds the full picture, where information is muddled, contradictory, or lost, and where individuals cling to whatever narrative feels survivable. In 1995, this seemed exaggerated for dramatic effect, yet the film's scattered tension mirrored how real societies react under pressure. Uncertainty spreads, communication fractures, trust evaporates. The virus in 12 Monkeys was only the spark. The collapse was the chain reaction of human response. What makes the film's warning so potent is its suggestion that truth becomes difficult to identify not because people lie, but because panic alters perception. Governments scramble, scientists conflict, citizens improvise, and through that confusion, mistakes compound quietly until they shape the course of the crisis. In its original release, this depiction felt overly dramatic, even absurd. Today, it feels like a stark reflection of vulnerabilities that had long been overlooked. 12 Monkeys wasn't predicting a specific outbreak. It was revealing how quickly certainty dissolves when the familiar structures we depend on begin to tremble, and how easily humanity can lose its way when confidence collapses. 7. Gattaca, 1997. Upon its debut in 1997, Gattaca was admired for its elegance and restraint, but many dismissed its vision of a genetically stratified culture as an intellectual exercise rather than a serious warning. Genetic engineering at the time was limited and new, making it easy for audiences to categorize the film's premise as speculative fiction. Yet its caution did not lie in predicting a future of mandatory modification. It lay in showing how quickly society adapts to systems that promise efficiency, optimization, and control. The film imagines a world where a person's value is determined not by experience or character, but by biological potential. This idea, once considered too extreme, now mirrors ongoing debates around genetic screening, predictive health modeling, and the ethics of selecting traits. Gattaca argued that discrimination can evolve into sophisticated forms, ones that emerge not from prejudice, but from data interpreted as destiny. What makes the film's warning so enduring is its subtlety. There is no dictatorship enforcing these rules. Instead, people willingly participate in a structure that rewards engineered advantage. They accept biometric testing as routine. They internalize the hierarchy as natural. In 1997, this felt like dystopian speculation. Today, it echoes concerns about algorithmic bias, unequal access to technology, and the growing pressure to optimize every aspect of human life. Gattaca cautioned that a society obsessed with perfection risks losing its humanity in the pursuit of measurable worth. Its message endures. The most dangerous systems are the ones we adopt willingly, believing they will make the world fairer while quietly narrowing the definition of who deserves to succeed. 8. The Truman Show, 1998. When The Truman Show was released in 1998, audiences embraced it as witty satire, a playful critique of media culture imagined through the lens of a man unknowingly living inside a broadcast. Most interpreted the film as a commentary on celebrity obsession rather than a warning about surveillance, manufactured identity, or the erosion of authentic experience. At the time, the idea that millions of people could be monitored, tracked, or influenced continuously felt too extravagant to carry real threat. Yet beneath its humor lies a subtle alarm many overlooked. The power of the film rests in how normal everything appears to Truman. He does not resist because he does not know resistance is necessary. His world is curated, predictable, and comforting qualities that make the illusion so effective. The movie hinted that surveillance becomes most dangerous when it blends into everyday life, when people no longer question why they are being watched or what is being shaped around them. In 1998, audiences saw this as charming exaggeration. They did not anticipate how willingly individuals would later share their lives online, nor how deeply digital systems would track behavior for profit and prediction. The seamless blending of privacy and performance that the film portrayed now mirrors the blurred boundaries of modern digital existence. The Truman Show did not warn that people would be physically trapped. It warned that they might be psychologically conditioned into accepting a curated version of reality, one tailored to keep them passive, entertained, and unaware of the mechanisms surrounding them. Its question remains haunting. If the world is shaped to make you comfortable, would you notice the cage? 9. The Matrix, 1999. When The Matrix arrived in 1999, most audiences treated its central idea, a humanity unknowingly trapped inside a manufactured digital realm, as stylish philosophical fantasy. Viewers admired its action and symbolism, while assuming its deeper implications were far too abstract to be relevant. At the time, the digital world was still in its infancy, and the notion that technology might shape perception on a societal scale seemed like adventurous speculation rather than grounded concern. Yet the film's caution was far less about robots and far more about complacency. What The Matrix warned against was not mechanical domination, but the gradual surrender of human agency. Its simulated world served as a metaphor for the systems people willingly accept, systems that curate what they see, guide what they believe, and subtly shape how they interpret reality. In 1999, these ideas sounded academic. Few imagined a future in which digital platforms, algorithmic feeds, and engineered experiences would play such profound roles in defining truth. The film suggests that captivity becomes dangerous only when it feels comfortable. The inhabitants of the Matrix remain docile, not because they are forced, but because they are unmotivated to question anything. It is a world built on convenience, routine, and distraction elements that viewers once saw as exaggerations of cyberpunk fiction. Today, those elements resonate with unnerving clarity as discussions around digital dependency, echo chambers, and information manipulation intensify. The movie's warning was never meant to be literal. It asked a simpler question: what happens when people let their reality be constructed for them? The Matrix foreshadowed a world where truth competes with illusion, and illusion often wins because it demands nothing. Its message stands. The greatest risk to human freedom isn't overt control, but forgetting to ask who is shaping the world we accept without hesitation. 10. AI, Artificial Intelligence, 2001. When AI artificial intelligence was released in 2001, audiences struggled to classify it part emotional fable, part speculative cautionary tale. Many dismissed its themes as sentimental exaggeration, believing that no human society would form deep emotional attachments to artificial companions. The film's exploration of affection, abandonment, and manufactured identity was interpreted as metaphor rather than genuine concern. Yet beneath its fantastical elements lies a warning about the emotional voids technology is increasingly asked to fill. David, the robotic child at the center of the narrative, embodies the discomfort of creating beings intended to replicate love. His tragedy stems from a contradiction. He is designed to feel devotion deeply, but the world around him is not prepared to reciprocate or recognize that devotion as real. In 2001, such emotional entanglements felt implausible, Few imagined a future where AI companions, digital personas, and machine-mediated relationships would influence human behavior and reshape social expectations. The film suggests that ethical dilemmas arise long before technology becomes advanced. They arise the moment humans delegate emotional responsibility to something built rather than born. David's suffering is not a consequence of malfunction. It is a consequence of being created for emotional labor no one is willing to sustain. Viewers once saw this as melodramatic fantasy. Now, the rise of AI-driven companionship, parasocial intimacy, and emotional outsourcing echoes the film's fears with surprising clarity. AI did not warn that machines might surpass humanity. It warned that humanity might blur the line between connection and simulation so deeply that its creations inherit needs we are unwilling or unable to meet. 11. Minority Report, 2002. Upon its release in 2002, Minority Report dazzled audiences with its futuristic production design and high-concept narrative. Many appreciated its sleek storytelling without taking its warnings seriously. Predictive policing was viewed as clever science fiction, a philosophical puzzle rather than a credible concern. Personalized advertising, biometric surveillance, and algorithmic risk assessment were seen as imaginative flourishes, far removed from any technological reality. Yet the film's central anxiety was never about a prediction gone wrong. It was about the dangers of trusting systems that appear infallible. The pre-crime program in the film represents a society seduced by certainty. People accept the loss of autonomy because the system promises safety. They defend its authority because they fear the chaos that might return without it. At the time, audiences considered this premise far-fetched. Few imagined a future where data collection, behavior forecasting, and algorithmic decision-making would shape everyday life. What the film foresaw was not technological dominance, but human willingness to surrender judgment. Minority Report examines a world where individuals are evaluated not by actions but by probabilities, and where those probabilities become indistinguishable from truth. This notion was once dismissed as intellectual fiction. Today, as debates around algorithmic bias, surveillance capitalism, and predictive analytics intensify, the movie's warning feels closer than ever. Its question was not whether technology could predict crime, it was whether society would accept punishment based on prediction at all. Minority Report warned that the more efficient a system becomes, the more invisible its compromises appear until they shape the world silently, beyond challenge, beyond oversight. 12. Children of Men, 2006. When Children of Men was released in 2006, many viewers regarded its bleak world as an exaggerated artistic exercise rather than a plausible warning. The film's vision of global infertility was taken as a symbolic device, a metaphor for cultural decline, rather than a scenario that reflected real-world vulnerabilities. Critics admired its realism but dismissed its depiction of political dysfunction, humanitarian collapse, and societal numbness as too extreme to resonate with contemporary life. Yet beneath its somber imagery lies a caution that viewers largely overlooked. Societies do not collapse from a single blow, but from sustained emotional exhaustion. The film's world is defined not by chaos, but by resignation. Governments continue to function, but without conviction. Institutions enforce order, but without purpose. People move through life as if waiting for an ending they can no longer prevent. In 2006, this portrayal seemed overly pessimistic. Few recognized that the emotional stagnation, mistrust of leadership, and sense of collective fatigue presented in the film could emerge under prolonged pressure. Its infertility crisis was never meant to be literal. It represented a world that no longer believes in the possibility of renewal, a society that has forgotten how to imagine a future. This thematic warning was often overshadowed by the film's technical achievements and long-take sequences, but the emotional truth remained. When hope becomes scarce, even functional systems begin to corrode. Over time, the film's muted despair has grown more familiar. Increasing polarization, waves of displacement, and rising global uncertainty echo the anxieties Children of Men quietly depicted. Its message was less about biological catastrophe and more about psychological erosion, the dangerous moment when a society stops believing it can improve. The world in the film didn't fall because it was broken. It fell because it had stopped trying to heal. 13. WALL-E, 2008. On its surface, WALL-E seemed like a charming, harmless adventure, a tender story about a lonely robot and a glimmer of hope. Its commentary on consumption, ecological neglect, and human complacency was softened by humor and warmth. Many viewers walked away, believing its depictions of overflowing landfills and a humanity immobilized by technology were exaggerated for animated effect. But the film's gentle tone disguised the sharpness of its critique. WALL-E illustrated a world that didn't collapse suddenly. It deteriorated piece by piece through accumulated neglect. Earth's abandonment wasn't the result of a single disaster, but of countless choices made with convenience in mind. Likewise, humanity's physical decline aboard the Axiom wasn't a punishment. It was the predictable outcome of surrendering basic functions to machines that promised comfort above all else. At the time, the notion that society would willingly embrace such passivity felt humorous, even impossible, yet the film quietly suggested that erosion of agency begins subtly. Every task outsourced, every decision automated, every responsibility delegated moves humanity one step closer to forgetting what it means to participate in its own survival. In 2008, these ideas felt distant. Today, as discussions about environmental tipping points, attention economies, and digital dependency intensify, WALL-E's caution appears remarkably precise. Its portrayal of a planet buried under debris resonates with ongoing concerns about waste, pollution, and unsustainable consumption. Its vision of humans absorbed by screens echoes patterns that have since become commonplace, and its message remains clear: civilization risks losing its vitality, not through catastrophe, but through quiet surrender. WALL-E didn't warn us about machines replacing humanity. It warned us about humanity slowly abandoning itself. 14. Contagion, 2011. When Contagion premiered, it was often described as unsettling but unlikely, a clinical thriller built on worst-case scenarios rather than plausible threats. Viewers found its procedural tone impressive yet emotionally distant, a dramatization of scientific crisis rather than a film meant to be taken as a serious warning. Many believed global systems were too advanced, too interconnected, and too prepared for a large-scale outbreak to unravel the way the film portrayed. Yet the movie's focus was never the virus itself. It was the web of human behavior surrounding it. The story reveals how misinformation spreads as quickly as illness, how confidence erodes under uncertainty, and how institutions struggle to operate when public trust collapses. These ideas felt bleak in 2011, almost pessimistic. Audiences assumed humanity had outgrown the vulnerabilities depicted in the film. They underestimated how small disruptions, delayed responses, panicked reactions, distorted communication could cascade into global instability. What many missed was the film's insistence that disaster rarely arrives in a single catastrophic moment. Instead, it unfolds through countless individual decisions shaped by fear, misunderstanding, and exhaustion. The societal fractures presented in Contagion were dismissed because they lacked dramatic flair, but they were the most realistic part of the narrative. As years passed, the film's once dismissed details gained unsettling resonance. The competing scientific interpretations, the scramble for accurate information, the politicization of safety, and the emotional toll of prolonged crisis. What audiences once considered exaggerated now reads as a restrained, almost gentle representation of what can occur when humanity is confronted with a threat it refuses to comprehend fully. Contagion wasn't trying to horrify. It was trying to prepare quietly, methodically, and long before anyone realized preparation was needed. 15. Snowpiercer, 2013. When Snowpiercer first appeared in 2013, many audiences treated its imagery as exaggerated, dystopian spectacle, something closer to a graphic novel brought to life than a genuine depiction of humanity's fragility. A frozen Earth caused by a failed climate intervention seemed too far removed from reality to be understood as an earnest warning. Viewers admired the film's intensity without considering that its central premise was not about an ice age at all, but about desperation disguised as innovation. The idea that environmental crisis could push governments toward drastic, poorly tested technological solutions was a message many overlooked. The train itself, endlessly circling without purpose, served as a symbol of a civilization unwilling to confront the consequences of its own choices. Inside its compartments, A rigid social ladder dictated who lived comfortably and who survived in darkness. An arrangement initially viewed as a stylized metaphor rather than a cautionary portrait of inequality, the tension between these carriages mirrors a truth the film quietly emphasized. When resources tighten and fear rises, societies fracture along lines they once pretended did not exist. For years, audiences dismissed the movie's underlying concerns because they were wrapped in bold visuals and violent momentum. Few imagined that discussions about geoengineering or global resource imbalance would become part of mainstream conversation. Fewer still considered that environmental interventions presented here as humanity's last attempt to regain control could produce outcomes more destructive than the crisis they were meant to solve. Seen today, Snowpiercer feels less symbolic. Its warnings about hasty climate solutions, escalating social disparity, and humanity's inability to change course once systems become entrenched now resonate with sharp clarity. The film suggested that the true catastrophe isn't the cold, it's humanity's instinct to double down on flawed strategies rather than admit they were flawed to begin with. The danger is not the freeze outside the train, it's the illusion of control inside it. Bonus fact: Annihilation, 2018. When Annihilation was released in 2018, many viewers approached it as a purely metaphorical odyssey, an abstract exploration of grief, identity, and self-destruction. Its dreamlike visuals and shifting biology made it easy to interpret as symbolic rather than literal. Critics debated its meaning, audiences argued over its ambiguity, and most walked away, believing it had little to say about the real world. Yet, beneath its shimmering surfaces, the film carried a warning far more grounded than its fantastical presentation suggested. Environmental change rarely announces itself clearly. It alters, distorts, and reshapes everything long before anyone admits something is wrong. The shimmer expanding silently across the landscape represents a crisis that grows not through violence, but through quiet transformation. Within its borders, ecosystems mutate, boundaries blur, and organisms adapt into unsettling new forms. Viewers saw this as artistic abstraction. Few recognized how closely it mirrored the unpredictable consequences of ecological imbalance, contamination, and biological stress. The terror in Annihilation does not come from a creature or a villain. It comes from the realization that nature, once pushed too far, responds in ways humanity cannot anticipate or contain. Each character who enters the shimmer confronts not an enemy, but a reflection, an altered version of themselves shaped by an environment they no longer understand. This idea, dismissed as philosophical flourish, resonates more sharply today. The world changes us whether we acknowledge it or not, and denial does nothing to slow the transformation. The film's final moments suggest that the true danger is not the shimmer itself, but humanity's reluctance to confront what created it. Because the most alarming disasters are not the ones that erupt suddenly, they are the ones that grow quietly while everyone insists they are still manageable. These films never set out to reveal the future. They tried to caution us about what we were already becoming. Each warning was woven quietly into fiction, overshadowed by spectacle, misunderstood as exaggeration. Yet as the years passed, the distance between their imagined worlds and our lived reality narrowed, until the boundary separating the two became almost unrecognizable. If these stories were dismissed once, how many more signals have slipped past unnoticed? How many cautions still lie buried in the frames of forgotten films, waiting for someone to finally understand them? The vault remains open, and there are still many warnings left inside.